Rishtanata. Thank you. Yeah, the PAAMA UK Rishtanata team welcome you all to this event, and we thank you for joining us today. We pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it beneficial to all of us, including those who are not able to join us for one reason or the other. My name is Lukman Adarabiayo. I have the privilege to be serving as the PAAMA UK National Secretary for Rishtanata. Our speech today is concentrated on marriage. So we have our guest speakers who are going to speak to us. First of all, what to do before marriage and what to do after marriage. And then the other speaker will speak to us about the Rishtanata activities. What is Rishtanata? Introduce Rishtanata to us for those who don't know. And then we take us through the Ahmadiyya Community Jamaat, the platform for Rishtanata. So on that note, I will call we start with the recitation from the Holy Quran, and I will call on our dear brother Jibril, Dr. Jibril Shitu, to recite a portion of the Holy Quran to us. Bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن آياته أن خلقكم من تراب ثم إذا أنتم بشر تنتشرون ومن آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يتفكرون ومن آياته خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف ألسنتكم وألوانكم إن في ذلك لآيات للعالمين. السلام عليكم.
Wa-alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for that beautiful recitation. I will call on Brother Athur Kwam Saif for the English translation, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Translation from the Holy Quran, Surah Al-Rum, chapter 30, verses 21 to 23. In the name of Allah, the gracious, the merciful. And one of his signs is this, that he created you from dust. Then behold, you are men who move about on the face of the earth. And one of his signs is this, that he has created wives for you from among yourselves, that you may find peace of mind in them. And he has put love and tenderness between you. In that, surely, are signs for a people who reflect. And among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your tongues and colors. In that, surely, are signs for those who possess knowledge. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah for that. Thank you very much. Like I've announced earlier, we're going to talk about marriage. And before we do that, our dear brother, Muhammad Rafiuddin, will talk us through the Rich Tanata activities, what Rich Tanata is, a brief introduction about Rich Tanata, basically. Mr. Muhammad Rafiuddin is currently serving as the National Secretary Rich Tanata UK and the chairman of the Rich Tanata Committee. He has had the blessings of serving the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and the auxiliary organizations in various capacities, including the COID, Regional Nazim Ala, President and Regional Amir. So welcome, Mr. Muhammad Rafiuddin. Please, the floor is yours. Jazakallah.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I prepared a SharePoint presentation, which I will try to share with you. Before I start, please let me know if you can see it.
Yep.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Respected Shafiq Saab, respected Luqman Saab, respected Jahangir Khan Saab, Maulana Jahangir Khan Saab, respected Maulana Mansur Clark Saab, and my dear PAAMA brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Firstly and foremost, I should thank Shafiq Saab for reaching out to me and giving me this opportunity to talk to you all today for a short period about the Rishta Nata department in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, what it stands for, what its purpose is, and what its objectives are. So I've got about 10-15 minutes to talk to you about the Rishta Nata department and how we can help you find suitable partners. So some people think that the Rishta Nata department is something that is relatively new in the West, where we have some problems maybe in finding suitable rishtas for our children, and therefore the department may have been set up. But in actual fact, the department or the concept of Rishta Nata was in fact established by the Promised Messiah Islam himself. And this is a quote from Majmu'a Ishtarat, which is writing of the Promised Messiah, and I'd like to read it out if I may. Promised Messiah says, and I quote, "I have made arrangements that in the future a book must stay with me with complete secrecy and total confidentiality, wherein the names of girls and boys of the Jamaat are entered, and everyone should feel confident that we shall, with true sincerity and compassion for the parents, do our utmost to find the most suitable match for their boys or girls. High priority will be given to their good conduct, character, and potential for progression towards goodness. Therefore, it is incumbent upon those who show their allegiance to us that they submit a list of their children with names, ages, and nationality so that it can be recorded in the book." So this is what the Promised Messiah instigated, trying to help members of the Jamaat find suitable rishtas for their children. And following on from this, the UK Jamaat actually has a department called Rishta Nata, which literally means matrimonial affairs. It's one of the few departments that is actually not elected. It is appointed by the National Emir or the local president in the local setup, and graciously approved by Hazrat Amir al-Momineen. Such an important area that actually there isn't just one Rishta Nata secretary, there are 7 of us. And we cover various areas, but are broken down into particular regions. We look after or have been given responsibilities to look after various regions, as well as various responsibilities. So myself, Mohammed Rafiuddin, I look after the Middlesex, Hertfordshire and Islamabad region. I also have the honor of being the chair of the Rishta Nata Committee. We then have Dr. Mohammed Ashraf Saab, who is the Secretary for the Midlands and Southwest regions. Dr. Mohammed Iqbal Saab is the Secretary for Northeast and Northwest. Mohammed Ahmed Aslan Saab is the Secretary for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Imran Sheikh Saab is the Secretary for Fadl Mosque, Batul Fatu and Batul Aslan, so the London areas. Mr. MD Saab is the Secretary for East and South regions. And then we also have an office, and that is manned by Sayyid Nasir Ahmed Shah Saab. The office is open 7 days a week, and it is there to help people. I should say that on Saturdays it is manned by Lajna, so ladies are free to come on the Saturday. I would say that please do contact or phone the office before traveling to it, because recently there have been some illnesses, so it may be that you might travel a long distance and find that the office is closed, and that could be because Shasab is ill, or one of his members is ill. So please do call before you travel long distances. As I said, Rishta Nata means matrimonial affairs, and our purpose, key objective is very simple. We're here to serve the members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, United Kingdom. We're focused on UK members, and all of our activities are focused on those UK members. And primary objective is to help you find your right marriage partner. If you're joining this Zoom call from abroad, then you would have your own Rishta Nata department of secretaries for your country. And there is an international Rishta Nata website and a Rishta Nata organization called Rishta Nata Markaz. They look after the international Rishtas. Principles are based on 3 things. We try to be empathetic, compassionate. We know that finding a suitable Rishta for your boy or girl can be very stressful. And in fact, it can be stressful for the child themselves. So the primary focus is to try to be as compassionate and empathetic as we possibly can. Secondly, we're committed, we dedicate our time to help resolve any issues, to help find your most suitable companion or life partner. And thirdly, we ensure that all your details that you provide us, and I'll go through how those details are stored, but all that information is kept safe and secure at all times. So those are our 3 key principles that we try to adhere to in the department. We have recently launched a new website, www.rishtanata.org.uk, and it contains some useful resources. I encourage people to please log on to that and to find out the information that's on there. But just briefly, I'll go through it. It shares with the users the process we follow, the success stories we've had, and by the grace and mercy of Allah, there have been many successes by the department. We've also got all the Nikah forms hosted on the website, so you can download the Nikah forms. These are not just the UK Nikah forms. There's if you're getting married abroad, let's say in Pakistan, there's the Nikah form that you require there, or the US as well. And there's guidance there on how to complete the Nikah forms as well. I know sometimes it can be quite confusing what to put in which field. So the guidelines is a guideline there to help you complete those forms. We're obviously here as well to help you if you have any questions. Then we're trying to compile a section of the website that has key resources. So we've got books and periodicals and articles all about Rishta Nata, all about the blessings of getting married and what to look for in a life partner. We've got extracts from Khulafa as well, and obviously the advice and guidance that beloved Huzur has repeatedly given us through Friday sermons and other speeches. We've also got audio clips as well. And the resources area, inshallah, will grow over time. So as I said, we recently just launched this, but we are looking to grow this over time, inshallah. So how can you utilize the facilities? The first and foremost thing is to register on the website your details. And there's two ways of doing that. You can register yourself, so you complete the information. This has your basic information about yourself. Excuse me, yourself. A little brief background about yourself, and also some detail about the person or life partner that you are looking for. And we ask you to complete that registration form. Parents can also complete the registration form on behalf of their children. You can see down the bottom here, you've got the very first question is it, please make the appropriate selection. Are you the candidate or are you the parent of the candidate? If you're completing on behalf of your child, then what we do is we validate that with your child to make sure that they have given you consent to upload their information there. So we will validate it with the child, and once we've received that, we will process the form. The first thing that happens once the registration is completed is that it is verified by our PAAMA department. So that's a basic check to make sure that you are a legitimate resident of the United Kingdom and you have a names card, basically. And because we do find that there are a lot of people from abroad who try to register as well, but unfortunately our facilities are exclusively for the United Kingdom residents. So we have to validate that the person that's registered is a UK resident. Then what we do is we appoint a dedicated facilitator who is there to contact the parents and the candidates and try to find out a little bit more about them, what their criteria is, what sort of partner they're looking for, so they can help them navigate through the database and try to come up with a short list of suitable candidates. The candidate themselves and the parents can actually search the database themselves if they've got access, if they registered, so you can put in criteria, and this can be things like age or education or those sort of things, or even keywords as well. And if you've between yourself and the facilitator, you've selected someone that you think could be suitable for you, then the facilitator will then arrange a meeting with the opposite party. That's obviously dependent on the opposite party also agreeing to meet you. So that's the next step. We've also developed a mobile app. So once you've registered, we'll send you a QR code. You can download this mobile app, and there you can see profiles of other people who have registered. We remove the personal information from there, so names, addresses, AIMS number, etc., etc. So it's top-level information that enables you to decide whether that person could potentially be a suitable partner for you. Just a brief snapshot of the data that we've currently got on our database. So we've got 307 candidates registered, 169 male and 138 female. This is growing all the time, by the way. It's interesting because I mean, I've only recently joined the department, but my first impression was that we would have more females registered than males, but actually it's the other way around. We have more males than females registered on the database. The other pie chart there shows that we've got 239 single people who are single who have registered, and there is also a number 68 that are looking for a second marriage. So they may be someone's divorced or widowed, etc. So the reason why I put this stat there is that some people think that the Rishta and Adab department is just there exclusively for for youngsters who are looking to get married for the first time. Actually, we're there for everybody, for all ages and backgrounds as well. So feel free to register if you are much older or you divorced or widowed or whatever it is. So that's the online database side of things. Recently, we've been instructed by the MESAB to actually hold what we're calling meet and greet events. These are actual physical events that we're holding up and down the country. And that is basically to give platform to families to come and meet each other. So the idea is that you will register for this event. You'll put in your basic information. We will try to match you up with other families or candidates who are coming to the event, and we'll try to make pre-arranged meetings so that when you turn up to the event, you can go and meet those families. You're obviously free to also mingle and meet those other families yourselves as well. So we have pre-arranged meetings and we have ad hoc meetings at these events as well. So we've had one, we had a very successful meet and greet event about in October. We had one in Bradford, and the next one is in Darul Barakat in Birmingham on the 7th of January. It's open to everybody. You don't have to have registered on the Rishta and Adab website. You can just register for the event. If you want to come to the event, by all means, just there's a QR code and a link you can scan and go to and register for that event. As I said, the profiles of those people who are attending are displayed anonymized, so we keep all the information anonymized, and then you can, through the facilitators, set up meetings. We have confidential areas or small meeting rooms where both families can meet. All we do ask is that you provide us feedback how the meeting went, whether it's positive or not, so that we can mark on our database. And by the grace of Allah, we've had excellent feedback from just these 3 events. So I've put a couple of emails that I received. So on the left, someone's responded saying, "I hope you're okay. It gives me immense pleasure to inform that one of my candidates," this is from a facilitator, "got a rishta. I met his father in Badu over the weekend, and he told me about this. I would like to share his story as it might be useful for others. His father said this rishta, which they came across before as well, or his family saw the picture but didn't take it further. But meet and greet event in Badu last month was an opportunity to meet the family in person instead of relying on pictures only. And they've, by the grace of Allah, they've actually got married." So the point I've put this in there is because I know there are lots of like WhatsApp groups where photos are shared of daughters and sons. And this instance highlights the fact that pictures, although do tell a story, actually when you go and meet someone, you can get a better understanding of the other family, whether you're compatible. And in this instance, they may have rejected that person because they thought that the person was not suitable. But when they actually met them physically, they decided to get married. And on the right, we have a similar success story, alhamdulillah. So alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah, mercy of Allah, we do have successes both from the main database, but also increasingly from these meet and greets that we are holding up and down the country. So hopefully that has given you a brief overview of the Rishta Nata department and what it's doing in the United Kingdom.
Jazakumullah khairan for this comprehensive presentation, Mr. Rafiuddin Muhammad Saib. May Allah continue to bless you and your team, and may Allah use this as a source of blessings for all our brothers and sisters who are looking for Rishta, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. So,
Allah, I request you to please remember me and the department in your prayers.
Inshallah, inshallah. Jazakallah. So, our next speaker will be, like we said earlier, now, what are the things we need to do? What are the things we need to look for before we get married? So, inshallah, our next speaker will be our scholar of the Jamaat, Mr. Mansour Hamad Clark Saib, and I will quickly introduce him to the audience. So Mr. Mansour Hamad Clark is a British Imam of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. His father was a British Ahmadi who converted to Islam Ahmadiyya from Catholicism. Having worked in the BBC and completed Jamia Ahmadiyya, he was instructed by Uzur Agdas to complete a master's degree in journalism, and afterwards was tasked with the overseeing the UK History Department, as well as helping to set up the Voice of Islam radio station. Along with serving on the editorial board of the Review of Religions, he is a regular commentator and lecturer on Islamic studies in the media and universities, and has also recently been made the first Imam Chaplain of Surrey Police. Currently, he is working on translating the Majmu' al-Ishtiharat of the Promised Messiah والسلام, from Urdu to English, and is completing a research book on the context and justification of all the Islamic battles during the time of the Khulafatul Rashidin. I welcome Mr. Mansour Clark to present his speech, and the topic will be Islamic guidance on choosing a spouse. Bismillah.
Jazakumullah Lukman Saab, and Jazakumullah Rafiuddin Saab for that enlightening presentation on the Rishta Nata department. I'll start with a small recitation from the Holy Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the ever merciful. O ye who believe, fear Allah, and let every soul look to what it sends forth for the morrow, and fear Allah. Verily, Allah is well aware of what you do. And be not like those who forgot Allah, and whom He has consequently caused to forget their own souls. It is they that are the rebellious. This is from Surah Hashr, which is chapter 59, verses 19 to 20. Whenever talking about the concept of the preparation for marriage, as it were, or what people should be looking at when thinking of getting married, I like to give a small example. And I guess it kind of helps us to understand the thought processes behind the things that we often hear about in speeches like this. I want you all to imagine, and this may be an example that you've perhaps heard before, I want you all to imagine that you are out and you are wanting to buy a coat. Now, there's two forms of buying a coat. I think there's also maybe a few mics that are on, and maybe if we can mute them, it would be better. If you're out buying a coat, or you're out looking for a coat, you're walking through the streets, if there's not a particular purpose as to why you're out, or a particular reason as to what you're looking for, you may be walking in a shopping center or past some shops, and suddenly something catches your eye. You look left or right and you see that there is a coat in the window and its appearance is attractive to you. And when you look into the window, you see that there is a certain coat and it attracts you and you think, oh, that's a nice looking coat. And if you were to go in and take this coat straight off the rack and take it to the tin and say, look, I don't care anything else about it. I love the look of this coat. I want to buy it immediately. People would look at you and say, fair enough. He has money to waste, or she has money to waste. And if they like the look of this coat so much, they don't care about what it is or what it does or anything else, its functionality, its utility, its cost, its price, nothing. He loves or she loves the look of this coat, they buy it. You take it home and realize that it doesn't do anything that you want it to do. It was simply an impulse buy, something which we often know about, that somebody liked the look of something and they bought it straight away, impulse buy. And often what will happen is the next day or the next week or the next month, the need of a coat arises, and the coat that one bought upon impulse does not fill the purpose at all. And so what happens? You're back in the market the next day looking for yet another coat. If, however, you know that you need a coat, and you know that there is a coat that you need to fulfill a certain purpose, maybe you're going on holiday to, I don't know, Saudi Arabia, and you need a coat that will keep you cool in the heat. Perhaps you're going on holiday to Iceland and you need a big padded coat to keep you warm in the freezing cold. Or perhaps you're going hiking and you need a waterproof and windproof coat that is not too heavy but can be fitted into your bag. Or a utility coat with pockets that you can put things in. How would you go about buying such a coat? You would leave the house thinking about, where would I go to find this particular coat? You would have a budget in mind. You would think about the utility and the function. It must have a hood. It must be lightweight. It must be knee length. The last thing you would think about is, what does it look like? In fact, if something fulfilled all the purposes and all the utilities and was at the right price and was the right make of coat, chances are you probably wouldn't care that much about how it looked. Chances are probably at home right now, you have one of those jackets or one of those coats that you bought not for how stylish it looked, but for what utility and purpose it provided. In fact, something which fulfilled all the purposes and yet didn't look that great at all, you would probably overlook it and still make the purchase. You'd go to the coat, and you'll understand why I'm talking about coats. Most probably most people have already clocked on. But you would go to the store and you would see, does this particular coat make financial sense? To me and my lifestyle, according to what I buy, what I don't buy, my means, does this coat make financial sense to me? You look at the brand of the coat and say, do you know what? Other coats of this brand before that I have bought, or that I have seen other people with, they seem to be very happy with them. It comes from a long line of good coats. Indeed, you would look at the attractiveness of the coat. You would say, okay, how nice does the coat look? But most importantly, you would look at the function of the coat. How does it better your life? Does it fulfill the purpose that you need it for? I mean, if you haven't caught on already, when we're talking about coats, indeed this example is the one given to us by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But not talking about coats, rather talking about the looking for a spouse, where we look at the cost of the coat. Does it make financial sense? The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, look at the wealth. Look at the financial situation of the family that you're marrying. Is it in concordance with your financial situation? Where we look at the brand, the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, look at the family. Because the status of the family will tell you a lot about a woman, or indeed about a man. Look at the attractiveness. Is this something that you are attracted to? It is not the deal breaker, but indeed it is something that people look at. Again, the attractiveness of a coat and the attractiveness of a spouse. But most importantly, look at the function. Look at the utility. Look at the righteousness. Because it's the righteousness that will provide that essential function in your life. That's the thing that will actually make a difference. Everything else is changeable. How it costs, what it looks like, the family situation, all of these things within a moment's notice can change. But the righteousness, the utility, the function of that coat or that spouse, the additional value that it gives to your life, that is the thing that we hold on to. That is the thing for which not just a coat is bought, but indeed a marriage is made. Of course, I'm referring to the very famous hadith narrated by Hazrat Abu Hurairah, and I'll say the hadith here, where the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that a woman is married for 4 things. And think about the example of the coat that I said before, i.e. her wealth, her family status, her beauty, and her religion. The same as the cost, the brand, the attractiveness, and the utility. And the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, so you should marry the religious woman, else you be of the losers. And just like a partner solely chosen for its looks, it's like a coat solely chosen for the color of the fabric. If it does not provide the function you need it for, it is pointless. And no doubt you will be back in a day or a week or a month, either returning the coat or indeed looking for a new one. Indeed, they say that lust is the fast food of the heart, in that nutritionally speaking, it provides very little benefit at all, if not much more detriment. But it's there to satiate that burning desire, that hunger right there and then. In the same way, lust is not love. Lust is not marriage. Lust is a way for human beings to satiate the hunger of the heart without looking to what they're sending on to the morrow, as the verses in the Holy Quran stated. It is something which we look at in the moment, there and then. Do we find this attractive or not? Does this coat in yellow, do we like it? Yes, buy it. Don't worry about what it's like or what it does, the cost, how it will fare in the rain or in the wind. Just buy it because we like how it looks. We spend so much time on this, yet we do not think about the marriage, the person who we were spending the rest of our life with. It's interesting because the Holy Quran, along with this hadith narration, along with the logical conclusions that have been made by the Khulafa and the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Holy Quran itself also speaks about this concept of a garment. Not just a coat in what we're talking about, but the concept of a libas. That you, husband and wife, are a libas for one another. But what does a libas even mean? Does it simply mean a coat to be worn? No, of course not. In fact, the meaning of this is so much deeper, in that it explains that a true libas is something which not only keeps an individual cool when it's hot, or keeps an individual warm when it's cold. It's not something that's just there for the beautification of the person that wears it. It's there for the protection of the person that wears it, like a coat of arms. But it's also there to hide and to cover the nakedness of an individual. That when somebody has this coat or this libas on, that person's flaws and mistakes are covered from the rest of the world. They choose to wear their libas for it makes them look even more beautiful. They choose to wear their libas because in moments of discomfort, their libas is the thing that keeps them beautiful. It keeps them safe. It keeps them cool or warm, depending on what they need. And so a decision on looking at a piece of cloth and say, that's beautiful, I'm going to wear that. Putting on a thin kameez, standing outside in the blistering cold, would anyone call that a good decision? Or would somebody call that ludicrous and foolish? Today, there are, looking around the world, we have millions of impulse buyers, those that find a piece of cloth and buy it straight away. As we have millions of impulse buyers in the concept of marriage as well, who do not look at whether this person will be beneficial to me, or better me, or will be a good person to raise my children, or a good person to bring into my family, whose morals I wish to adopt. They look at the state of the makeup on the face, or if the beard is connecting, or if the person has a six-pack. And of course, these are elements that Hazur, the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, is mentioning as these indeed are things for which people marry. And of course, keep them in mind. Nobody wants a coat that smells and you do not like looking at it. You'll never wear it. But this is a situation which is secondary to the real purpose of marriage. Finding that true libas that fulfills that utility and that function. I mean, we live in a situation where we spend quite literally weeks or months looking at the details of our SIM card plans. So what do we get free with this that we don't get with that? Or when buying a car, we look at, oh, does it have a reversing car mirror? Would I be able to sit comfortably in the seats? How much is the back seat being put down? How many more pieces of luggage? We think about everything. The MPG. How many miles would I be able to travel and how much would it cost? Everything is thought through. The resale value. How much money could I put together to buy it? They spend months trying to understand where to get the best deal. And yet in marriage, it's a matter of hours. Love at first sight, they say. As if an individual can walk in to a car showroom and buy a car on a whim and not be called foolish, yet he can walk into a marriage making the most important decision of his entire life or her entire life, and yet make a decision in a second and call it love. Indeed, this is foolishness. These are the people that will be raising our children. The people that when we come home to, that will be those will be the people who create the atmosphere in our house in which we, our parents, our children, and our Jamaat will live. And we make the decision on the basis of the color of their skin or the amount of makeup or the style of their beard. Everyone looking at this can understand that if one who buys a coat on a whim is a fool, then what would be the state of someone who makes a decision on the basis of looks in marriage? And yet, having said all this, we speak about how we are to find the perfect libas in somebody else, to find that beautiful coat, that perfect person who will fulfill all the utilities and functions that we need. We make a huge mistake because we forget that even though we are looking for others, that we have expectations, in actuality, we too are a libas for another. They too have expectations of us. And so as we are either growing ourselves to an age where we wish to get married and we start to think about these elements of what we would like to see in our future partner, we make the grand mistake, probably the biggest mistake of all in this sense, which is to forget that we too must be developing ourselves to become the libas of another. If someone was to bring us into their life, would we raise the standard of their life? Would we be such that when we are with our partner, they would feel beautified, protected, comfortable? Or are we simply looking for other people and not looking deep enough into ourselves? Indeed, the famous saying comes to mind that you see the twig in your brother's eye, yet you don't see the log in your own. But of course, these things can't change overnight. We have this concept of, in Urdu we say, shadi karega sudhar jayega. That if he gets married, he'll become reformed. And I'm sure they say it about the women as well. When she gets married, then she'll learn very quickly. Where does this happen? It is not the responsibility of a husband or a wife or a mother-in-law or a father-in-law to teach you or your children how to behave. It is your responsibility. You as an individual to better yourself, and parents to better their children. Are we ready? The example to follow is that of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we look at him and you think, how can somebody not love such a person? Let's put all of the religion aside. Forget the fact that he would stand for so long in prayer that the skin on his feet would crack. Look at the way that his wives talk about him. Look at the narrations of him running with Hazrat Aisha. That he would run, so obviously he is physically fit, but look at the love that he would show her. The fact that if somebody can say about you, in fact, if so many people can say about you, that it was his practice to smile. Who has that as a practice? That you're known to be smiling. Or your wives to speak about you in such love that when he would come out of the shower, he would be glistening. And they would talk about in such detail where the water would be dripping from his hair and you could see the perfume glistening in his hair. Imagine how hygienic and clean this man was. Imagine how helpful and loving this man was. Imagine how physically and mentally fit this man was. Imagine how into his worship and looking after the rights of the poor and the needy and the orphans this man was. When this man was like that, then of course, you would say that he would find a good wife. But we look around and we look to other people to find amazing qualities in them, yet we forget our own selves. We are trying to find the one, and yet we are not even number 2 or number 3. In the verses I recited in the beginning, the translation, I'll read a portion of the translation again. It said, "Let every soul look to what it sends forth for the morrow, and fear Allah, and be not like those who forget Allah, and whom he has consequently caused to forget their own souls." And it's a clear lesson for us all, that we must look to what we are sending on for tomorrow. And what is that? Of course, we can look at the hereafter, but the thing that we are looking at right here and now is our children. The children that we are sending on into the next day, into the next generation. If we, Allah Ta'ala states here, if we do not fear Allah and we forget Allah, they too will forget Allah. And what will happen? They will forget themselves. They will not look to better themselves. They will look to better other people. They will not look to give rights. They will look to take rights. And that responsibility lies on them, but it lies on parents as well. It can only be achieved when there is taqwa in our hearts and in our homes. And so parents, it is our responsibility as well to make our children worthy of marriage. It is not enough just to say, have you read your prayers today? Or don't tell a lie. We must raise our children in a way that people will want to marry them, that they are the one that people are praying for. We expect the parents of our daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws to have raised them better. They should have taught her to do this. They should have taught him to do that. But where is our tarbiyat? Is our tarbiyat, is our upbringing of our children such that we will raise them to the status of prophets? Have you in your house raised a Khadija, an Asiya, a Maryam, or even a Muhammad, that you wish to find one in the open? Walking in a street, you wish to find an Aisha or a Khadija. And yet the children that you have brought into this life, the efforts that you have made, are nowhere to be compared. Another issue which often is spoken about, and I'm a notoriously bad timekeeper, so please do jump in and tell me to be quiet if I'm taking too long. Another issue which is often talked about is this concept of compatibility. And even though I understand that this is an anglicization of the word hamkufov, someone that is compatible with us, yet when we hear people talking about I'm finding someone that's compatible for me, it irks me. Because of the fact we're not looking for compatibility. We are looking in this day and age for adaptability. If you are always looking for the person that fits you, the perfect fit, it is a fantasy and you will never find it. The proof of this is even in your houses right now. Ask the married couples, are they the same now that they were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even last year? And they will laugh and say, no, we have learned much and we have changed much as well. If you look for someone that is compatible with you, you will both change over the course of your marriage. But if you look for somebody that is adaptable with you, one who holds the same values as you, that will grow along with you and meet the challenges of life, i.e., that has taqwa and righteousness, who will face challenges and obstacles for the sake of Allah in the way of a believer, then 10, 20, 30, 40 years mean nothing. And this is why the verses of the Nagar repeatedly talk about, and they say, ittaqu, 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 fear Allah, fear Allah. For when we do that, when we look for that, when we look for that function and utility beyond all else, that is the thing that remains. There is also a understanding that many people say that they are not yet ready for marriage. And there's a few quick things that I wish to say about this as well. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in fact, specifically said this. He said that there are 3 things that should not be delayed. Number 1, prayer when the time comes. Number 2, the burial when the funeral has arrived. And number 3, the marriage of a single woman when there is a good proposal for her that suits her. And of course, this should also be the situation for a man. Moreover, there is we call it a jijik or a hesitation in getting married within one's own family. In fact, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis Ayyadahu has said that if a compatible and righteous marriage proposal exists within one's own family, then it should be preferred. Of course, however, this is not mandatory. With all these things in mind, it is important for us as we live our normal lives. Of course, we are here in this Jamaat gathering now, and we all remember the hadiths and the verses and the quotes of the Khulafa. But when we turn on our TVs and we resume, let's say, our normal lives, and we base our expectations from the dramas or the opinions of others, and we forget that we have in front of us the examples of the most pious men and women known to mankind. We have the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, of the promised Messiah, of the Khulafa, who live among us still today. And so don't base your expectations and your opinions on them, on these dramas and these opinions of people who wish to sow division within your family. Before marriage and when you're getting your children married, learn about the example of the pious people in the Jamaat. For boys, for example, and I've mentioned this before because it's a beautiful example. For boys, you should read Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Apni Tahrirun Ke Ruh Se, which of course is an Urdu book, but there are extracts of this available in English. It's Mirza Ghulam Ahmad in the spirit of his writings. Or have someone that knows Urdu read it to you and translate it for you. There is a portion in here about women. It's called Women. And any individual, any man that's to read this book and this chapter would feel an immense amount of shame for how little he has prepared for marriage. Another book is Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Khamis's book on matrimonial issues and their solutions. This is also a very good book for young girls and the mothers of girls who are getting married. And also a very, very powerful book, which is Hazrat Sayyida Nusrat Jahan Begum Sahiba, an inspiration for us all, by Munawwara Ghori Sahiba, Abid Khan Sahib's sister. A fantastic book which makes you full of awe at the practical implementation of the teachings of Islam in marriage. And so, a very important point, I mentioned this a few years back, I believe at a similar PAAMA event actually. Just before this, I happened to go for a mulaqat with Hazur Aqdas Ayyadullah Nasr Aziz, and there was a number of families around where I was living at the time who are having matrimonial problems. And I went to Hazur and I said, Hazur, what is a simple piece of advice that I can give them? And Hazur said, and I'll say it in Urdu first, Hazur said, Apne ghar ka mahol aman aur mohabbat wala banao. That make the atmosphere of your home one of peace and one of love. Now, this is not just for those people who have now been married, because you cannot be a good father without being a good husband, without being a good son, without being a good brother. You cannot be a good mother without being a good wife, a good daughter, a good sister, because these are based on morality. Whether you abide by the teachings of Islam in your day-to-day life, are you a liar? Then you will lie to your wife. Are you a cheater? You will cheat on your husband. Are you argumentative at home or with friends? You will argue with your husband and your wife. Do you raise your voice and swear when angry? You will do so in front of your children. You do not need to wait for the day when you say, oh, I do, labbaik, kabul hai, whatever it is. The changes you need to make are now. If you become a true Ahmadi Muslim, you will be a good wife and you will be a good husband. But do not make the mistake of thinking that if you skirt around and avoid the teachings that Islam has given us, that you will somehow be able to make the biggest decision and the biggest chunk of your life somehow work. And so make a change in your morals and in your character. And then pray and pray your socks off that Allah Ta'ala puts it into the mind and the heart of someone else to make the similar change, because you cannot assert and impose a righteous change on your husband or your wife. You can simply only lead by your own example. And so I would like to end and say, find that perfect partner in yourself first, before you start looking for that perfect partner elsewhere. May Allah the Almighty enable us to understand our responsibilities as Ahmadi Muslims and to live up to that standard and that expected standard that is seen by the Khulafa and by every Ahmadi Muslim of a man and a woman. May He enable us to raise a generation that we are proud of and to set an example by our own words and actions, which creates aman, peace, and mahabbat, love in our households. May Allah enable us to do so. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Jazakumullahu khairan. I'm speechless, and honestly, I just want to invite all members of the audience 1 minute silence to reflect on this, on the beautiful speech given by Masur Clark Sahib. I'm going to be muted for some seconds. Honestly, I want people to reflect 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 60 seconds, and then we start again, inshallah. Please ask yourself questions: where we are, where am I, what am I doing? Let's reflect on this. Okay. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah again. Somebody's Dr. M. Ashraf is raising their hand. I don't know what they want to say. Is it a question? If it's a question, can you please write the question down in the chat group, please, Dr. Ashraf?
Okay, Jazakallah.
Yeah, Jazakallah. So, with the hope that we all, because there's nothing else to add to that wonderful speech. We hope that we all reflect on it now, and we continue to reflect on it for days to come. I will call on our next speaker to talk to us about now what we do during marriage. So what Mr. Mansour Clark has brilliantly spoken to us about is what to do. Who should we be before we get married? Now we're going to listen to what are the things we should be doing when we get married, inshallah. So I'm going to call on our next speaker to speak to us about the responsibilities and duties of couples in Islam. And I will call on Maulana Jahangir Khan Saib who will be speaking on to us about that. I will introduce him before he takes the floor. Maulana Jahangir Khan Saib was born in London but grew up in Mauritius. His parents are of Christian background. His work was accepted in 1987. He has served the Ahmadiyya community as a missionary and translator for over 30 years in the Congo, Belgium, France, and is presently based in the UK. He has been heading the Jamaat's International French Desk since 1995. Bismillah.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dear brothers and sisters of PAAMA, I would wish to first of all thank the administrators for having given me this opportunity to be with you today and to speak a little bit about this on the topic of marriage. I also wish to thank my brother Muhammad Rafiuddin Sahib for a very brilliant presentation of the Rishta Nata website, and I must admit that I learned quite a few things about this website today and of its usefulness. Jazakumullah. And I also wish to thank Maulana Mansour Clark Sahib, who hasn't left much for me to talk about anymore, having covered this topic so brilliantly and from every angle. His speech extended even beyond the choosing of a partner, well into the marriage and even till the end of our lives. So I'm going to be adding just a few little points here and there. One thing which I'm pleased to have noted is that Maulana Sahib also mentioned a few books which would be very useful for our members here and to benefit from. One of them is you could say it's been culled from different speeches which were made by our present Caliph, Ayatollah Ta'ala bin Salas, and the title is Domestic Issues and Their Solutions. It's a very, very interesting and very useful book. And the pieces of advice which Rasul has given in this book are all based on real situations that Rasul has encountered during his caliphate. So therefore, they're of high importance to us because these are actually a reflection of what's been happening over the years that Rasul has been a Khalifa. And so many of us will recognize issues which we have either come across in our own lives or that we've come across in other people's lives who are near to us, of friends or family. And it's therefore very, very useful if we could have a look at that. It's on alislam.org. It's very easy to find. It's called Domestic Issues and Their Solutions. Now, if you only look at the different topics that have been dealt with in that particular book, just reading the contents itself of the book, it's like a speech. If you just look at the different headlines, you know, like the titles of the different issues that Rasul has spoken about, it really does read like a speech. And you can learn things even just by looking at the actual titles of the different chapters. It's quite amazing. Now, Rasul, in this book, I'm going to be basing a lot of what I'm saying on Rasul's book. Rasul decided to start with the Islamic nikah, and that is exactly the verse which Maulana Mansour Clark Sahib recited in the beginning. So I won't have to do that again. But the main point which was in that particular verse is taqwa, so fear of Allah. And just to remind you that the fear of Allah is not something meaning that we have to fear that God is going to be punishing us if we don't do something right or something like that. It's not just that. It's more about fearing to lose Allah's love. And when we have taqwa in our hearts, we always try to act in such a way that Allah does not become displeased with us in such a way that He stops loving us. And so therefore, we'll try to model our lives according to that concept of always trying to be on the right side of Allah so that we can always have His love and never lose His love. This is reminded to the couple who are coming together in the sermon of the nikah, so that they can start thinking about this right from the beginning, that they are now about to enter into something which Rasul has called a pledge, which Rasul has also called a contract between the husband and wife. So why has he called it this? It's because in this pledge, in this contract, each party is promising to do certain things. And they will all be based on taqwa, or fearing to lose Allah's love. Therefore, whenever we say something in a marriage, when we're married, whenever we do something, we always have to think beforehand whether this word of ours or this deed of ours is going to draw more love of Allah towards us, or is it going to make Allah stop loving us in as much as we've moved away from Him and we've angered Him. So this is very important. It's a very serious contract. It's not one to be taken lightly. And we have to remember what the purpose of marriage is. This is what Rasul said is the thing of next importance. So first of all, we're going into a marriage with a fear of God in our hearts. We are going to be aware and always remind ourselves of our duties of a husband towards a wife and the wife towards the husband, of a husband towards his in-laws and a wife towards her in-laws. So there's all that going on. And then we have to remember the purpose of marriage. Now, the obvious purpose of marriage is procreation. It's to create a new generation of human beings, and not just create them, but also their upbringing, also their moral training, their spiritual training, how to make them good people, as Maulana Sahib was saying, that we have to gear all our efforts towards making them become godly people, making our children become godly, but also making them ready for marriage, making them become people whom others would like to marry, would want to marry. So this is the purpose of, one of the purposes of marriage. Another purpose, of course, apart from the continuation of the human species, is to build a stable foundation for our relationships. Now, you'll see that the family is itself like a basis for around which a whole load of relationships revolve. And one person once told me that when you get married, and he was right, when you get married, it's a package deal. It's not like just one person entering into a relationship with another person. It's one person entering into a relationship of many people. There are all the people who come with the spouse, and that person will have to build a relationship with them as well. And his spouse will have to do the same with him and with all the people coming into the marriage on his side. So this will create, if this relation between husband and wife is a stable one, it will be a stable point around which all the other relationships will revolve, and everything will remain in harmony. It will be a little bit like the galaxy that we're in. So because our sun is stable, you'll see that all the planets are revolving around it, all in harmony, in perfect harmony, and there aren't any mishaps, there aren't any events that are happening, you know, that would threaten the existence of that solar system and the whole galaxy as well. They're all revolving one around the other, so within the galaxy. So therefore, this is also very, very similar, and it will have an incidence on all the other households around us. Even one stable household in a village could have a positive effect on all the other households in that village. And then it can go beyond into the towns, and it can go beyond into the whole country. And it could have an effect on even other countries, on the whole world. And this is how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his married life and his relationship with his wives became it became something which had an effect that not only influenced the whole world, but it's also influencing the whole world throughout time. And it will continue to influence human beings until the end of time. But that was just one set of relationships. It was his households with his wives. But as you can see, the blessing can extend well beyond the walls of just one home. Now, one aspect which has to, which is part and parcel of having stable relationships, and on which all our behavior and all our deen is based, actually, is truth. Truthfulness is the main foundation of everything in Islam. It's the main foundation of all meaningful human life and existence, even outside of Islam. If you could think about, you know, just the material world, then you'll know that people who are truthful are the ones whose business works the best, whose relationships with other companies or other countries is one which is are working in the best way possible. It's because they're trustworthy, they're honest. So we can't be, as Maulana Sahib had said earlier, we can't be lying and outside the home, because then we'll be also lying inside the home. And if we're lying inside the home, then it means that we're dishonest. Maybe that means we're cheating on the spouse. Maybe it can mean that we're not being honest with the finances of the home, and so many other things. There will be things which will be hidden. One spouse will be hiding something from the other. So that cannot be the foundation of an Islamic household. It cannot be the foundation of any kind of household. If there are lies involved, then there will be no blessings. Now, Islam, of course, is a complete code of conduct. It tells us how to behave in every imaginable situation. And regarding a husband and a wife, the word libas has been used, and we heard that in the speech of Maulana Mansoor Clark Sahib. Of course, when he was mentioning going on holiday in Saudi Arabia and coats, the image which sprung to my mind, and maybe to many others' minds, was Messi wearing the Arab bisht recently at the end of the World Cup. But we were very quick to learn that it wasn't that Maulana Sahib was getting at. He meant it in the Quranic sense, which is that a husband is a kind of vestment or is like clothing for his wife, and the wife is also clothing for the husband. And this, of course, means many things. Rasul has explained this many times, that one of the meanings is that the husband and the wife will protect each other in different ways. For example, they will not disclose secret matters regarding their spouse to other people. And that will also include if, for example, there is a polygamy which is happening in a family. Therefore, if the husband is married to more than one wife, he will not be telling one wife the private matters of the other wife, and vice versa. And the wives also will not be talking among themselves about private matters between each wife and the husband. So it's a very delicate balance to maintain, but each spouse has to behave like clothing, which will be shielding either the husband or the wife, according to the case, from people finding out private matters which regard them. So these are so many areas which, of course, need to be explored. We don't have a lot of time to go into that today. That's why I'm advising you all very humbly to go and read that book, because it's been put forward in great detail by us all, by the grace of Allah. So there's also that aspect. So therefore, the husband and the wife really are very close. They're a very closely knit team. And each one will look out for the other. Each one will protect the other from any kind of harm. Harm could be physical. And as we know, one of the roles of a man in the house, being the stronger, usually he's the stronger one in the marriage. So therefore, one of his roles will be to physically protect his wife and children from any kind of danger. And this is why you'll see that if in the dead of night there's suspicious noises, for example, God forbid, in the house, usually it will be the husband who'll go around to look for something that he can use as a weapon, and he'll go downstairs or wherever and he'll try and sort the matter out. He will not tell his wife to go and sort that out while he stays in bed. So this is obviously something which in all human cultures, you'll see this is the case. But of course, there are some exceptions, and it reminds me of a joke which Hazrat Khalifa Rabi rahimahullah used to tell. He said that in a certain house, a thief broke in one night, and the couple heard him, so they rushed into the sitting room, switched the light on, and they found the thief there. So they caught him red-handed. Now, the wife happened to be quite heavy build compared to her husband. So her husband told her, "You sit on top of this thief while I go to call the police." And then he was taking his time to go. So his wife asked him, "Why aren't you leaving? Go." And she was sitting on top of the thief, because as she was quite heavy, she'd pinned him down completely. He couldn't move. So the husband said, "I can't find my shoes." So the thief said, "For God's sake, take my shoes, but please go now," because he couldn't bear the weight on top of him. So sometimes in some households, these are the exceptions. Because why I'm saying this is because often you'll hear in these societies that we live in the West, who do not agree with the natural order of things, that in general, men are the stronger sex in comparison to women. So you'll see some people are, they're quite annoyed by that. And they say, "No, we're all equal. And you can't say that, you know, some are better than others or some are stronger than others. We're all the same." Yes, we're the same in many respects, but in some respects, we're also different. For example, men can't bear children. And in general, men are stronger than women. So there are advantages which go both ways. Also, you'll find that usually women are better at understanding other people emotionally, etc., than men are usually. But there are exceptions in both camps, on both sides. So, but Islam, of course, is a pragmatic religion, and it bases its rules and the advice it gives on the general case which everybody understands, and not on exceptions. Another exception which once Hazrat Khalifa Rabi had talked about also in the past was that in general, you know, the rule in the Quran is الرجال قوامون على النساء. So men are guardians of women. Again, this is a verse which a lot of people in the West do not like. They're very allergic to that verse, and they will always be quoting it, saying that, you know, you don't give rights to women, you make women be controlled by the men, etc. But actually all it means, as it was said, as the verse itself explains, that Allah says, because some of them excel physically over others, meaning that men are usually stronger than women, therefore they should be their guardians. And we shouldn't expect women to defend men, we should expect the men to defend the women. But also because they spend out of their wealth. So therefore the husband's decisions should also be respected in the house. They must, of course, discuss major decisions that the couple have to take. This can also be a source of tension between husband and wife when they can't agree on what to do in life. For example, move country or something like that, you know. But at the end of the day, because the husband is the one who has to provide for his wife, therefore he should have priority in determining what's best for the security of his family. So that's something which is understandable. But as was said, there are exceptions. For example, in some households, it's not the husbands who are actually financing the family. It's the wives who are financing the family. This happens in certain households. And therefore, he said in those cases, it would be the wife who would have a greater say in the decisions regarding the finances and other issues related to finances of the family. So of course there are exceptions, but in general, this is what we see is what Islam tells us about. Now, another issue which, going very quickly, we won't be able to see all the issues raised here, of course, because we don't have much time. But another issue, which is a major one, is controlling anger. Huzur has spoken about this many, many, many times. Recently also, he's been speaking about this, that people should really control their anger. And if they want, and I've seen Huzur giving this advice to not newly married couples, but couples about to be married during his nikah sermon. So he'd tell them that the best thing to do, if you see something or you hear something that you don't like in your spouse, is to stay quiet. You should pray, you should do istighfar, but don't start shouting, screaming, showing your anger, because this will just make matters get worse. So it says, close your eyes and remain calm. And inshallah, if you pray, Allah will make the situation change, inshallah. So that goes both for the wife and for the husband. And it's something which is very easily forgotten these days, because we live in a society which is used to getting everything they want immediately. So long ago, even 40, 50 years ago, if you wanted to eat a certain thing, you'd have to actually go and get the ingredients and make it. Nowadays, you can just go out to the shops and buy it and immediately eat it. So we're a spoiled generation. We really are. We're spoiled in so many ways. But unfortunately, because we're used to getting everything immediately, like instant gratification, we also expect that in our married lives, and that's very wrong. We have to have patience, and this is where Islam steps in. Islam tells us that we have to learn to be patient. Patience is a very big virtue, which is extolled greatly in the Quran. And we have to bring that into our married lives as well. So we have to think, if I react to something that my wife has said right now, what will be the consequences? Will it be worth it? Will raising my voice make things better, or will they make them worse? And the wife has to think the same regarding her husband. Also, and Huzur has spoken about this, if one of the spouses is already angry, now you're in a situation where one of them is angry. So what should the other one do? The other one should just stay quiet, not add fuel to the fire. So there are many things which we can do, but we need Allah's help, because saying this is all well and good. But when we're actually in the situation, it's not that easy to remember all these pieces of advice. But one thing we can remember is to always ask for Allah's help, so that we can always act according to the teachings, the beautiful teachings given to us by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I'm going to end on this one thing, because time is flying by. But the importance of prayer. Prayer, of course, the 5 daily prayers, if we don't concentrate on saying our 5 daily prayers correctly, then the blessings will just fly out the window from our homes. We can't expect to neglect Allah, and then Allah will keep on blessing our family. That's not going to happen. But I'm talking here also about praying for our families. As you know, Allah has taught us a very nice prayer. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. So in that prayer, we're asking Allah to grant us from our spouses and our children the delight of our eyes, and that Allah makes us all become imams for people, so that we can be leaders, that we can be examples for others. So we cannot deal with this on our own. We do need Allah's help. If anyone thinks that they can create a great household, a great relationship with his wife, or she with her husband on their own, they are deluded. We need Allah's help every step of the way. And we need to be doing istighfar all the time, so that Allah saves us from slip-ups. This is very, very important. And we need to be praying for our children as well, that our children do not go astray, that they remain the delight of our eyes all their lives until the time comes that we have to leave them, that we're always pleased with them. And even beyond, when we have left this world, that they are children who are still praying for us. Now, if a husband and wife have behaved nicely to each other, they've taken care of each other's feelings throughout their lives, and the children have seen this, then such children will continue to pray for their parents even beyond their grave. They will still keep on praying for them. They will still be sacrificing things for them, for example, paying their tahrik jadid, etc., even after their demise, because they saw that their parents were exemplary. So that's what we should be aiming for, and it can only be done with the help of Allah. One final word here is that both men and women, so husbands and wives, should remember that it's very important to remain in contact, in close contact with the Khalifa of the time. As the Khalifatul Masih al-Thalith, the third Khalifa, rahimahullah, had once said, the Khalifa is not separate from you. The Khalifa is part of your person. So he's part of you. So therefore you can open up to him and you can tell him all your worries, because he's like a father, but more than that, he's part of you. So therefore you should always remain in contact with the Zuhr. If there's any trouble, if there are any difficulties, or if you yourself feel that you're not able to be a good spouse, whether you're a woman or a man, you should ask for Zuhr to guide you, to pray for you, and this will bring immense blessings into your lives. So with these few words, I'm going to end here. There have many other things to say, but we haven't got a lot of time. So may Allah enable us all to act upon this. And please take a moment to think about all the things which were said in this program today. Also make good use of the Rishta Nata department's website and get in contact with your Rishta Nata secretaries so that we can find appropriate spouses, matches for you or your children. May Allah bless us all and keep us all on the right path, and may He enable us to be exemplary in our lives, whether it's our married lives or our life outside the home. May Allah enable us to do so. Allahumma ameen.
Amen. Allahumma amen. Jazakumullah khairan. Rabbi Sahib, Jazakumullah. May Allah bless you and make this speech a source of good inspiration and beneficial to all of us. Jazakallah khairan. So the next item on the program is Q&A. So please, we've got some questions already, which we'll be asking to our scholars present today. However, please, anybody with any other questions can ask them on the Zoom chat, and inshallah, if time permits, we will try to touch every question. So the first question here is from somebody from Ghana, and no, sorry, from the UK is, and they said, what general advice would you give to a boy born and raised in the UK to marry somebody residing in Africa? Maulana Janagir Sahib, please. Janagir Sahib, sorry.
So the question is, what advice should we give a boy who's born and bred here in the UK?
Yes.
Regarding marrying a girl in
Africa. Yeah.
We'll give him the same advice as we'd give him if he wanted to marry a girl born and bred in the UK. But I think what he means is there might be some cultural differences or differences of understanding. Well, that's understandable. Of course, there will be different outlooks on life, etc. But that's where the question of adapting to the other person will come in, and you have to go into a marriage like that, knowing that there will be differences. For example, it can be really little things. I can tell you one thing, for example, my wife is from Syria, and when we cook in the kitchen, so when I'm cooking, often the dishes which I'm making, let's say I'm making a Mauritian dish, it will often end up having some kind of an influence from Syria in there. Because she'll say, why don't you add a bit of this? Why don't you add a bit of that? And so when she's cooking, I do the same to her. and we get hybrid dishes coming out, you know. So this is just one way where some people could potentially be quite annoyed and say that that's not the way my mum used to do it, you know. And so you can imagine right there could be a row that could last for a whole year just because of that one thing that was said. So therefore, we have to be patient and we have to be adaptable. And so when you know, people sometimes think that because somebody is born and bred right next door to them, that they'll be more compatible with them, but that's not at all the case in many instances. Somebody coming from right around the other side of the globe could be far more compatible with them because they're more adaptable. And therefore they manage to, you know, make concessions, and their lives will be much happier. So it really doesn't depend on where the person comes from. It all depends on how ready they are to be patient, to make concessions, and it has to go both ways. We can't expect one spouse to make all the concessions and the other spouse just, you know, says, okay, fine, well, I don't need to change. That's not going to work. It has to be, you know, you have to meet the person halfway, wherever they come from.
Jazakallah khairan for your explanation. So, Maulana Mansour Clark, this is for you. And it reads, what advice would you give to a boy or girl born and raised in the UK that are about to get married, considering the fact that they are both keen on their rights and have little consideration for compromise in marriage? The influence of the Western world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my first answer would be if we can copy paste the first part of Jahangir Saab's answer. The advice given to everyone that's getting married is very similar. In this regard, though, I think with the particular idea of rights, there is, Hazur has actually spoken about this at length on many different occasions, speaking both about international relations as well as internal household conflicts as well, where people have come to a stage where they're continuously fighting to establish their own rights as opposed to establishing the rights of other people. Now, that sounds like a very easy thing to do. And many people, when you say to them, do you establish the rights of other people? They're like, yes, of course we do. And yet, if you stand on a roundabout on one day and see the reaction of people when they get cut off from the right-hand side and they have to wait all of, 5 seconds as the car goes past that should have given them way, they absolutely lose all sense of reality. And it becomes as if their biggest, most essential rights have been usurped in that moment. And actually, it kind of boils down to the place of least resistance. What do you have control over changing? You cannot enforce some change to be taking place in somebody else. If a boy and a girl are married and they're living together somewhere and you wish for your wife to do something, actually there's very little you can do to force her to do something. And equally, if you wish to be stubborn and hard-headed, there is very little that your wife can do to force you to do something either. Actually, the only way you'll probably come about doing it is out of the softness of your heart or out of the fear of upsetting the other person, or indeed, if your marriage is really on the rocks to begin with, the fear of divorce. And so it's about a matter of least resistance. What do you have control over changing? And the answer is simple, it's yourself. You can only change yourself. So there's two ways in which the rights of the world are established. Number one, everybody fights to the death so that their own rights are established, which we know has been going on since time immemorial to the detriment of the world at large and every household within that society. Or there is the Islamic way, which is do not look for your own rights, rather establish the rights of the other person. And in emulation of that, the people that are in your household will then in turn try to establish your rights. And by changing your attitude, you will thereby influence the attitude of the people in your house. Actually, this is why in the Holy Quran it talks about believing women for believing men. It talks about different attributes of women for men. And Hazrat Masih Maud, the Prophet has spoken about this actually, because he talks about it's quite strong words. He says, women are thieves. And you suddenly taken aback by that. And Hazur explains that women find the morals that are hidden within the heart of the husband, not the morals that he wishes to show the world, but the morals that he actually has in his heart. Much like how when a thief enters the house, he doesn't look for the jewelry sitting on the top of the dresser or on the table. He knows that the really valuable stuff is hidden away in drawers or under mattresses or in cupboards. and he'll search until he finds it and take it for himself. And so if a husband or a wife wishes for their spouse to be good, they must first inculcate those excellent morals within themselves and establish the rights of the other person. And in turn, Allah Ta'ala, and obviously praying to Allah Ta'ala the Almighty, in turn pray that the spouse that's living with them also establishes their rights. That's the only way of doing it. Even that's not perfect, because we all slip up, as Murabi Sahib has said, but we all slip up. But of course, if we try and establish the rights of others, then the world will somehow, inshallah, turn around and establish our rights for us.
Jazakallah khairan, Jazakallah. So the third question will go to Mr. Muhammad Rafiuddin, the National Secretary for Rishtanata UK, and it says, what are the criteria that are used to match people registered with the Rishtanata and the steps that are taken to guarantee the confidentiality of the users on the platform? I think you've mentioned that actually, but if you want to say a few words.
I did try to cover that, but just to clarify, we take the confidentiality point first, and the data itself is held in a secure database. Access to it is only given to certain individuals, namely the secretaries, the 7 secretaries that I mentioned, and the facilitators who are helping the candidates to find their partners. So we not only have to abide by the moral obligations that we have, but we have legal obligations living in the United Kingdom. So under GDPR, we need to make sure that the data that we handle is protected and kept secure and confidential. When we share information, we try to remove all the fields or all the data that can identify an individual. So it's just the fields that show what the individual is looking for in a life partner. That's what we try to share, or the facilitators try to share. Coming back to the first part of the question is, what are the things that people look for? It can be all sorts of things. I really wish that the people listen to the 2 speeches by our scholars, because once they've listened to both those speeches, then their mind will be automatically focused on the most important things that are required in a life partner, and to also look inside oneself as well. I know rudimentally, people may say, well, I'm looking for an individual that is 5'8" and above, so I'm going to filter everybody that's below that. Those are superficial categories that one can look for, but actually it's much more than that. I think it's looking at, as Maulana Sukhar Sahib and Jamil Sahib both eloquently mentioned, it's looking at that adaptability of the individual, how that person is going to adapt to your lifestyle and how you are going to adapt to your potential partner's lifestyle.
Jazakallah, Jazakallah. Maulana Janagir Khan Sahib, so the question, this one is for you, and it goes, we live in a Western society where polygamy is not permitted, but is permitted in Islam. As Muslims, how should we conduct ourselves when faced with such a decision to marry a second wife?
I'm taking it this has come from a lady. When we're faced with the decision to marry a second wife, I don't think any husband will be faced with that decision. Yes. Well, you see, first of all, we have to remember something, which is that although polygamy is a right of which is to men in Islam, the Promised Messiah's guidance is that men should try to satisfy themselves with just one wife and not seek to marry more than one. Because in the present context, first of all, usually, especially in these countries, or so far at least, and for several decades, there haven't been any wars, there haven't been any compelling reasons for people to marry twice. The only compelling reason which we see is if, for example, the first wife is infertile. then in that case, often you'll find it's the wife herself who suggests to her husband that he should marry again, just so that he can have children. So this is something which there are even some instances of that within the Jamaat in the UK that I'm personally aware of. And it's for that very reason that the first wife couldn't bear children, so therefore she suggested that her husband marry again. But in the case where a lady is suddenly told by her husband, well, guess what? I feel like I need to marry again. So obviously the questions which will appear in her mind will be many. One is, am I not good enough? Why the sudden need to marry again? Does my husband have the means to have multiple wives, etc.? What about my children? If she has children, how are they going to be affected by this? So these are all matters which have to be taken on board before taking such a decision. Also, we have to remember that a lady who just cannot abide by the thought of having to share her husband with somebody else has the right in Islam to use that as nothing else except that as a reason for divorce. So she can say, well, you can get married, but I'm getting divorced. And it will be accepted as a reason. It's enough of a reason for her to end her relationship with her husband. So all these things have to be carefully thought about. These days, if the Prophet ﷺ was saying that men should only marry once as far as possible, it's because of the situation in this world that we're in. So first of all, as I said, there are not necessarily these compelling reasons, like, for example, having to take care of orphans or having to take care of widows who've become orphaned or widowed in the battles that are raging. So it's not the case for many of us, at least. In some parts of the world, of course, they could argue that it is the case, but that's different. But we're talking about this context here. But also because this is a time where people are ruled by their whims and their desires. And so the Prophet ﷺ, of course, being the person sent by Allah to preserve Islamic values, would of course tell us that we should not follow the path which is the one of desires. And of course, many men will protest righteously and say, well, we have the best of intentions when we're marrying a second wife. But deep down, I think everybody knows that, when a man arrives at a certain age, when he's in his middle-aged, often it will happen, this is human nature, that they'll feel that, they no longer have the full youth that they used to have, and they want to prove that they're still, as good a man as they were before. And therefore, you'll find them often running off with somebody who's much, much younger than themselves, which would tend to prove that that's what the real intention was. It's to show that they're still as good as they were when they were young. So there are all these different, of course, can't judge because every case is separate, is different, potentially. But in general, this is what we see. And so therefore, this is just a way of following one's whims and desires. And it's a way that Satan can destroy a household by making a man fall for the thought that, in Islam, I have the right to marry more than once and my wife has to accept it and whatever, So that's a very dangerous path to walk down. It could affect his children forever, the children from his first marriage. It could destroy his household, the one that he put so much effort into, into the building of for all those years in his life, just because he wants to follow his whims. So we have to be very, very careful not to fall into that category of people who are getting married once again or are contemplating a second marriage. We have to be very, very careful of that. And we also have to think about the feelings of the first wife. Now, we know that some people have it written into their conditions of marriage that their husband will not marry again while they're alive. So there is that, and that's absolutely fine. It's allowed Islamically. I've even heard suggesting it to certain people that if you want, you can do that. But the thing is even if they don't have that condition written in, the wife still retains her right to be divorced from her husband if the husband decides to what she perceives as to upturn her entire world by getting married to somebody else. So some of ladies, of course, can live with that idea and they're okay with it. So that's fair enough. But most women we know, if you ask any lady, she'll say that she would not even want to think about something like that. And that's their nature. And they're like that because they need to be jealous so that they can protect the family. Jealousy is something which Allah has put in human hearts to protect the family unit. So if people were just so open and so easygoing about everything, the morals would just go out the window, and there would be nothing left of any value within a human life. So therefore, this is also a natural thing, and it's not like the men would like to put that down as that my wife is being unreasonable. She doesn't want to cooperate with me. I want to get married, and she should understand. It's not that at all. She is playing her role as the good wife, and the jealousy is all part of that. It's for protecting the family. Now, I know this is going to raise some eyebrows because we are in PAAMA after all. And in the African, of course, we know that polygamy is something which is much more common than here it's common in the West, but it's polygamy without the responsibility attached, without the marriage. It's happening everywhere. But in Africa, we know that it's something which is culturally more observed. It doesn't mean it's more accepted though, because I know for a fact, I myself, I've asked Lajna in different countries in Africa what they think about it. And they were as much opposed to it as the ladies in the West are. So I was quite pleased to see that there's no change there. It's all the same. So therefore, even if it's part of your culture, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's part of Islam. You have to make a very fine distinction between that. I mean, we hear Zohar telling people all the time, because we have a majority of South Asians in the Jamaat in many countries. So he usually, he'll be advising them on that, saying that, remember, Pakistani culture is not necessarily Islamic culture. But we also have to remember that African culture is also not necessarily Islamic culture as well. And that goes for every ethnicity, every nation. Some parts of their culture will be aligned with Islam and some others will not be aligned with Islam. And so therefore we can't say that, because it's our culture and therefore you have to accept it. Well, if it's not Islamic, then we are not bound to accept it. And that's just that, So it's something which it's a decision which has to be taken after a lot of reflection. And it should be ideally taken if the first wife is on board. If she agrees and she's happy with it, then there's no reason why it can't go ahead. But if you see that this is going to bring destruction to the family, unhappiness, and everything that you've taken so much effort to build is going to be destroyed, then I think that for the sake of everything good, the man should refrain from a second marriage, because there is really not really any need, in most cases anyway, to go for a second marriage in this present set of circumstances that we find ourselves in the 21st century, for the moment anyway. So this is how it is now. Maybe later on, if there are wars, etc., things might change. So the Lajna will have to be a little bit more patient then, maybe. But for the moment, it's not the case, I think.
Zakala, so yes.
Feel free to disagree.
Yeah, there's a second part to that question actually, and this is supported by data. And because, for example, in African countries, they encourage men to marry second wife. I think we are seeing the same thing here in the UK already. From the data, from the statistics they show to us, I think there is more women, more ladies on the Rich Donata platform than men. So we have many in Africa, for example. I participated in one Rich Donata seminar in Nigeria, and there were double the number of sisters looking for men, for husbands, compared to men. Number one of the reasons is people have more girls as children. Number two is because while it is normal for ladies to be righteous, to have fewer men that are marriable, they are most of them don't pray, they're not responsible, they are not educated, and so on and so forth. So and the argument is now, the second part of the question, if the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam practiced it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages into Islam, not because of lust of anything, or only because people, there are many sisters out there, righteous, pious, educated, good Muslims, but they can't find good men. So what stops men from taking them as wives when they are Ahmadis there and nobody is happy being alone? This is the second part of the question.
Mhm.
How can...
Well, I mean, and feel free to add any comments that I'm saying this to my other panelists here, but I think that the conditions are the same anyway. You know, whether it's a situation like you're describing or it's different from that, marriage is something which is a very big decision, and it has to be carefully thought about before anyone enters into it. It's a full contract, and as long as people are getting happier and their situation is getting better, society is getting better, then it's fine. Of course, Islam will go for that. But if it's not the case, and usually what we see is that it's not the case, then they should refrain from it. So I think the acid test is to see whether people are happier after the event, and by people I mean everybody involved in the situation, not just one person or two people, but all of them.
Sure.
But if that's not the case, then it means that there's something wrong about it. Obviously, it can't be that that there's so much suffering is being caused by something good. That can't be. So people have to be careful and not be, they shouldn't beguile themselves with all kinds of excuses and all that, because it's the end result which counts. If you're bringing unhappiness to the world, then you must be doing something wrong. Unless, of course, the people who are unhappy are evil people, because evil people, they're unhappy when we do good things. But if in general the people are pious and good people and they're becoming unhappy, then definitely what you're doing must be, or in most cases will be, something bad. It won't be something good or beneficial. So you have to be careful of that.
Jazakallah. Maulana Mansur Clark, you have anything to add to that, please?
I think maybe just a very small point, not much to add. I think Robi Saab has covered most of the points, or in fact, probably all of them. The rules for wanting to get married, even if it's the second marriage, it does not mean that they've been altered from all of the rules that we've been speaking about for the past hour and a half of marriage. The same concept of if somebody wishes to get married again and they wish to get married simply for how somebody looks, or if they're rich, or if they're from a good family, all of those rules still the same apply. The fact is still that there must be a utility and a function that's being fulfilled. And of course, in the second marriage, usually, if we've seen throughout history, it is the husband fulfilling a function and a utility for another person as opposed to this way around. So the examples that we have, say, from the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was a very specific function that was being fulfilled through that second marriage. And there was no concept of it's simply because she's very good looking or simply because she's incredibly rich. These are all very superficial reasons. And actually, usually those are the reasons that people nowadays are wanting to get married because of. Nauzubillah, God forbid, because somebody's spouse is older and they think that they can perhaps get someone younger, or they think that perhaps I'm bored of this spouse, I want to get another spouse. These were not the kind of precedents that was set by the pious people from whom these practices came. So again, if an individual is in that situation where between a husband and a wife, there is that, let's say, a want felt by one party, and we know which party that would be, it's something which should be looked at between the husband and a wife, because ultimately we are told that each one of us is a shepherd and we will be asked regarding our flock on the Day of Judgment. And if we have unnecessarily caused hurt and pain to another individual simply to fulfill a want of ours, that is something that we will have to be giving evidence for and testimony on the Day of Judgment. So if we are able to appease Allah the Almighty in the court of the divine, then it's perhaps something that we can think about. But if even there is a small knock in the heart that you think, maybe not, then I think you should think twice, if not three times, before making that kind of a decision.
Jazakallah, Jazakallah. So while you're here, I will throw the next question towards yourself again. So it says, how should we allow our different cultures to influence our marriages? For example, Islam teaches obedience to one's husband, which in a country like Western world, it can be interpreted to be a controlling behavior.
So I think there's two questions in there, and they should be separated. One is the notion that culture and religion is the same, which is a wrong notion. There's a clear differentiation between the two. One is something that we practice on our day-to-day, regardless of being religious or not religious. And the other, of course, is the way that we live our life in accordance to the teachings and the practices of Islam. That's one question. The other question is about this concept of controlling behavior. Now, let's do the second question first, which actually has already been answered in part by Jahangir Sahib, talking about this Qawwamuna, about how men are seen as considered as superior. Whereas actually this is something which is quite easily refuted in the sense that they are seen as the safeguarders and the protectors and the providers for women. Someone gave the example once saying that, is the security guard standing next to the queen seen as more important than her? When or the king now, when the bullets fly and a security guard pushes the royal member of the royal family to the ground, controls what they're doing, but they're not doing it because they're more important than them. They're doing it because they have been given a job to do. And this job has been given by Allah the Almighty. So, and controlling behavior is very different to protecting somebody. Again, we are told to treat the members of our family with love, with kindness and consideration. These are all practices by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him. And so it is very possible to provide for and to protect one's family without being controlling. Understanding someone's needs and wants and requirements, coming to decisions as a family is one thing. And enabling your partner to live their life as they see fit within the confines of Islam, and helping that partner to do that and supporting that, that is something that we should be trying to do. So the controlling part is something which is a responsibility given to men in Islam to be overlooking and be responsible for the moral upbringing of the house, to ensure that things are running on track, and to ensure that there is the support for the people endeavoring to do the Islamically sanctioned and enable them to do things that they want to do. It is not that you become, as we say, a jabbar, a jabir, a tyrant in your house and think, this is my area, this is my castle, he who steps against me steps against the Lord. In fact, this is a shirk. Even speaking about how one treats their children, the Holy Prophet, we read in the Hazrat Masih Maud has said that such a person who treats their children, rebuking them and hits them, or they become so angry with their children that they become almost like their enemy in how they deal with them, this is in actuality shirk. So a husband that speaks to his wife in a similar manner is also performing shirk. If he believes himself to be God's authority on earth in the household and does not hold himself to the same standards that he holds his family to, this indeed is shirk. And so there is a very, very, very careful procedure which a Muslim man must go through, because even though he is in a position of authority, if he, let's say, figuratively cracks the whip, it will surely break his marriage. And so there's a very calm and collected way of doing it. The perfect example is that of the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and how he treated his wives. He was still the man of the house. Indeed, he was the man of the whole government of Islam, and huge countries were under his rule. And yet he spoke in a way that only people would talk about how he smiled and how he was kind and how he was humble and loving. In terms of the first half of the question, when you talked about culture and religion, indeed, they are two opposite things, but they do affect one another. The ways in which we, say, for example, simply the different style, well, actually, having seen it, everyone's wearing the same kind of headgear. That sentence usually works, but everyone seems to be wearing the Indonesian topi today. But usually people will practice the covering of the head as a matter of it being Islamic, yet the color of the topi they wear, the style of the topi they wear will be slightly different. In that sense, culture can enhance our religion. But when culture comes against the principles of Islam, that is where the line must be drawn. And we can see, for example, the cooking of 10, 15 dishes and the spending of 10, 20, 30,000 pounds at weddings, the renting out of Bentleys and unnecessary spending, or situations within the West where, for example, we have the celebration of Christmas or Halloween, where in an attempt to become amalgamated with the country in which we're in, we start to lose the values that we hold dear. Somebody very cleverly said once, and very importantly said, that there are those people who mold their lives around their religion, and there's those people that mold their religion around their lives. And so if we are changing and letting go of our values of Islam simply to fit in with society and culture, that is wrong. But if we are able to enhance our lives and making our lives fit around our religion and enhancing our lives, that is beautiful. In the hadith, it says that anything good that a Muslim finds, he should pick it up and own it. It is his lost belongings. And so when we find good in any culture, we should adopt it and improve ourselves, but never at the detriment and at the loss of a principle of Islam, because that is the guiding factor.
Jazakallah khairan. Thank you very much for that. Our respected brother Rafiuddin Muhammad Sahib will be leaving us now. So I want to take this opportunity to say thank you very much for joining us and for your kindness and for your presentation. May Allah continue to bless you. Thank you. Be leaving us because he's got another engagement at 7. So Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Sahib.
Thank you very much. And mashallah, thoroughly enjoyed this session. Jazakallah for inviting me. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz. Assalamu alaikum. So the next question is Malana Janagir Sahib, and it says, can a wife refuse to financially support her husband to run the family even if she knows the husband is struggling?
You see, in Islam, the wife has the right to refuse to finance the family because that's not her role. It's the role of the husband to finance the family, whether he's poor
it says
support,
not finance the family, support our husband.
But do you mean financially?
Yeah, financially.
Yeah.
The husband is struggling, so
yes.
Maybe the husband lost job, he's lost his job. So yeah.
Well, you see, this is one of those areas where if the husband has been nice to his wife and hasn't tried to marry a second time, for example, then maybe the wife might consider helping him out in his time of duress. So I mean, I'm saying it in a joking way, but the thing is that if you have a good relationship within the couple, of course, the lady has the right to take any decision she wants in, use her money in any way that she desires, but she cannot be forced to do that. And we can't have a situation like we see in Western couples where, the husband will say, okay, I'm going to pay the bills this month and you'll pay the bills next month. But we don't have that. The wife in Islam will say, you're paying the bills every month. But of course, if she knows that her husband is in trouble, then she can help. But that will be considered like charity on her behalf. And it's not at all her duty. And the husband can't complain and say, well, you can see what kind of situation I'm in and you're not helping me. Because if she has a valid reason to keep her money, she must have some valid reason, then we can't compel her. And a husband doesn't have the right to ask his wife for money either. He can tell her I'm in trouble, but he can't say, okay, can you pay for this or something? That's not his right given to him by Islam. And if he does that, he's going beyond his rights and he's doing something which is not Islamic. But the wife, of course, she knows intimately what's going on in the house. So even before her husband says, many wives you'll see who love their husbands will come forward and they'll say, don't worry, I'll help you out with this money I have or whatever she has, some property or whatever. And she can do that out of the goodness of her heart. But if she doesn't do it, nobody can blame her and nobody can condemn her for being cold-hearted or ungenerous or anything like that, because that's not her role in Islam. In Islam, it's the man who has to pay for everything. He has to look after his wife, he has to look after his children, and he has to also take care of himself. And often you'll see he has to also take care of his elderly parents as well. So these are his responsibilities and they're not his wife's responsibility. The wife does not have to help the husband at all. But if she does so, that will be written down by Allah as charity coming from her. And therefore it's a very good deed, because charity begins at home, and that's also an Islamic principle. We should help first and foremost the ones who are nearest to us in our relations, And then after that, people who are like, like our neighbors or even further afield, but we should try to help those who are the closest to us first. So this is just a word of advice to ladies who may find themselves falling into the situation, but it's by no means a compulsion upon them to do so.
Jazakallah. Thank you very much for that. The next question is for Maulana Mansour Clark, and here it is. So, how should in Islam we should not disobey our parents? However, somebody, a boy or a girl, wants to get married to somebody they truly loves, but the parents disagree because they believe the man or the woman is not educated enough, or is not from the same, is not rich enough, he or she has not got the potential to be what they imagine or what they want their in-law to be. How should this boy or girl react to that?
This is one of those answers where I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. So whichever way I answer the question, I'm sure that there'll be some people that are disgruntled by my answer. But anyway, we'll say it nevertheless. The fact of the matter is that these decisions, the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has quite clearly said that if the girl herself or the boy himself are not in favor of the rishta and not in favor of the marriage, it can be annulled. That there is examples of this. There is also the very obvious understanding that a child that has been raised by parents who have raised that child literally from a drop to a stage where that child can now make their own decisions, one should be in a situation where they understand that the father and the mother will always want the best for the child. So there is a need to understand that. And of course, by a case-by-case situation, you cannot say that in every situation that the girl or the boy is right. And you cannot also say that in every situation the parents are right. So it would need to be taken step by step. But of course, this should be done with all mutual understanding, because of the fact that if, let's play this out. If a girl wishes to marry a boy and the parents are strongly opposed to it, even if they get married, what will be the quality of life between the parents and that child? What will be the quality of the life between the children of that newly formed couple and their grandparents? And slowly you start to see that there is a breakdown of many different familial ties between the different relations. And so these are one of those situations where we shouldn't let it get to that stage where there is at loggerheads between parents and children. It's interesting in the question we said that a girl who wishes to, I think it's a girl you said, or a boy, but they wish to marry someone because they love them. At what stage have they been that immersed with this other individual that they have formed these ties of love? In fact, this is perhaps where righteousness should have kicked in quite a while before, where love should not be formed before a marriage. Love should be formed after the marriage. And this is one of the problems that we face in society, where people become so enamored by the other person who they think that, oh my gosh, wow, I was sitting there and this girl came in with the rishta, absolutely smelling amazing, looking amazing, bringing tea. What could be better than this? Not realizing that that's not what life is going to look like 10 years down the line, when problems are faced and when obstacles need to be overcome. And so one should be very, very mindful of one's wali, the one who is a guardian over that child, and knowing the fact that if indeed they are Islamic, if they are abiding by Islamic teachings, that they should be looking after the interests of that girl, of course, or that boy. Of course, in this situation, we are very, very fortunate, because as Ahmadi Muslims, we have the person of Hazrat Khalifa al-Masih. Now, when we have the opportunity and there is ever a disgruntlement between, say, the father and the daughter, or the mother and the daughter, and they cannot come to a decision, then by all means, this matter can be taken to Khalifa al-Masih in order for a decision to be made. But before that's the case, every possible effort should be done for there to be a mutual agreement, because it's only for the betterment of the parents and the children for that agreement to take place, because it might be seen as a one-time agreement and decision about marriage, but actually the after effects and the ramifications of that decision will be felt for generations to come. And so it's not something that we should see as, I want chips for dinner, and someone else says, no, well, I want biryani for dinner. That's it. It's not as simple as that. This is something which has far further reaching effects than we can possibly imagine. And so a mutual agreement should take place. And if not, one should seek counsel. And if that is not a situation, then one should seek counsel with Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, who, as has already been said, is part of us. And of course, we don't wish to burden Hazrat Khalifatul Masih with every small issue, but nevertheless, when we speak to Hazur, we turn from that, the state of fearfulness to one of peace. And this is indeed one of those situations where we would seek guidance from Khalifatul Masih. But again, I'm sure Jahangir Sahib will have something to add for this.
I just had one thing to add with respect to new converts. This is a situation where a new convert might have to not listen to their parents when they're going to marry within the Jamaat. Because if their parents are not Ahmadis, they might try to pressurize their daughter or their son to marry outside the Jamaat. In those circumstances, of course, the new Ahmadis should be firm and very politely tell their parents that, look, I'm in this Jamaat now, I'm going to be marrying in this Jamaat. And they can take their opinion on board to some degree. Maybe even the Ahmadi person they want to marry is not really good for them, and maybe the parents have, sussed the person out, even though they're not Ahmadis. That might happen. But in general, their opinion would not be given much weight, because they're trying to get their children to marry outside the Jamaat and therefore destroy their deen, basically. So in those circumstances, new converts should be relying more upon themselves, and as Maulana Sahab just said, they should get the advice of Huzur as well and ask for his prayers, because we've seen in many instances that non-Ahmadi parents who are seeing their daughters or sons marrying within the Jamaat and they're very unhappy about it, when they keep on praying about it and Huzur prays about it as well, after a few years, their hearts melt and their relationship becomes good with their children once again. So sometimes the anger that they show is only temporary, and it's fixed somewhere down the line if people keep on praying about it, and if they keep on being nice to their parents in every other domain, apart from not listening to them in the marriage when they were getting married, but in everything else, if they help them, they're there for them, then sometimes their parents finally come to terms with the fact that their children are now in this new religion and they've married within this new religion, and that's just how it's going to be. So that's just the little thing that I wanted to say here.
Jazakallah. So the next question is for you. Please, the questioner asks, please, is surrogacy abominable in Islam?
Surrogacy is not allowed in Islam for different reasons. One is that if, like I had said earlier, if, for example, a wife can't conceive, but her husband is fertile, then in Islam, he has the right to marry again, but keeping in mind the fact that his wife has to be on board, etc., because that's the best set of circumstances. Hopefully she'll be on board, and in many instances, she herself will be proposing the second marriage. So that's how it works out in Islam usually in these cases. But with surrogacy, first of all, it's now a relationship of sorts, even though it may not be a physical one, but it's a relationship of sorts between the husband and a woman outside the marriage, who will now be carrying his child. And in most instances, the child will also be hers. So in some cases, as far as I know, sometimes they can try to use the gametes from the couple who can't conceive and insert them into the womb of a third party. So that might be the case. But there's also the rejection issue there, that her body might not accept it easily. So in many instances in the West, what they do is the surrogate mother is a participating is a participant in the whole thing, and so therefore that child is also hers. So it's a child between her and the man, the husband, who is not her husband, is the husband of somebody else. So this raises all kinds of issues. One is of obviously a paternity and inheritance issue, but there's more than that. If the surrogate mother is supposed to hand over the child after it's born, we see that there are different scenarios that can occur. In one very difficult scenario, she being the mother, or even if she's not the mother, but she's carried the child, she can develop a bond with that child, and it will be very difficult for her to relinquish the child thereafter. This is going to open a whole new, set of problems. And sometimes what can happen also is that she can epigenetically influence the child. Now, if she's epigenetically influenced the child that even wasn't hers, she just carried the child, but because it's been influenced by her, that will mean that if she has children, that child that she carried will not be able to marry them according to Islam, because they will then be like closely related, like siblings. We know that's the case, for example, with even breastfeeding. If there's a mother who's used as a wet nurse to suckle a child that isn't hers, she can, through her breast milk, epigenetically inform the way that certain genes are turned on or off in the baby. And because of that, that child will become more similar to her own offspring, to such a degree that Islam will say, do not marry them. So they can't marry the children of the wet nurse. Now, that's actually just a few days back or so answered the question on can there be breast milk banks used in Islam for infants whose mothers don't produce milk, etc. And Hazur said no, because we don't even know who those mothers are, for starters. Usually their identities are not revealed, the ones who are giving their milk, offering their milk to be put in the banks. And so therefore, all the children of those mothers who are participating in that will not now be able to marry the child who's using the milk. And how will you find out where they are? Without, unknowingly, you could marry one of them and then later on find out that that was your milk brother or your milk sister. So therefore, these are issues which Islam does not allow. So the only other way to go about it is either they go for in vitro fertilization and try to implant the baby, if I could say, in the very early stages, in the actual wife, or they can think about having a second marriage. So that's how it will work in Islam. So surrogacy is not at all allowed in Islam.
Jazakallah. So one member said, Maulana Mansour Clark, he or she said, Jazakallah, Mansour Clark Saib, for beautifully presenting the concept of taqwa and relating this to a successful marriage. This is an important concept, but how should we apply this in day-to-day rishta management to get the successful outcome?
So I didn't get the last sentence. Rishta after rishta?
How should we apply this in day-to-day rishta management to get a successful outcome?
I think it's absolutely, Jazakumullah, for the question. It's a really good question. It roots back to what is taqwa. Often when we talk about, often when we do these nikah sermons, we talk about the fact that taqwa is mentioned so many times. And as Jangir Sahib has already mentioned, taqwa is not simply the fear of God. It is the fear of God, but it's also the fear of displeasing God, fear of the anger of God, fear of making the person or the being that you love more than anyone else upset with you. And I personally believe that the fact that this is mentioned so many times in the nikah sermon is a sense that whenever you do something, you are doing it out of the want to make your partner happy. And when you don't do something, you are doing it out of fear of displeasing or upsetting your partner. So that's one thing. The other element is the fact that when we look at what does taqwa actually mean, it means to save oneself. And the explanation given, and we've heard this many times, is as if you are walking through a narrow path with thorny bushes on either side. And as you would walk through with, say, long robes on, you would hold your clothes close so that they don't snag. But it's also denotes how you would then walk as well, because not only would you walk hiding and pulling your clothes closer to you, it's inevitable that some of your clothes will snag on the bushes. And if you were to walk through quickly, the smallest of snag could rip whole lines or whole threads away from your clothes. And so you walk through knowing that you will be snagged. But as you were to walk slowly, when you get snagged, you have the time to move back and unsnag yourself and keep on walking. So taqwa in a marriage is looking at and assessing each one of your actions and words to think, is this true? Does it need to be said? And is it kind? To make sure that, as Hazur, I said earlier in my speech, that apne ghar ka mahol aman aur mohabbat wala banao, make the atmosphere of your house one of love and peace. Does this work towards that? Also, Hazur also said that you should close all of the faculties of listening and hearing and speaking about negative towards your spouse. So if you have something negative to say, stay quiet. If you hear something negative about your spouse, make yourself deaf. If you wish to see, if you're seeing something negative, make yourself blind to that. And instead, try to see the benefits and the beauties in your spouse. And taqwa, the biggest thing about taqwa will be the fact that when you know that God is watching you at all stances, each one of us knows that we have one or two things that if they were to be revealed to the world, that we hold in our hearts, and we are scared of anyone knowing, that only Allah knows, that if they were to be exposed to the world, we would never be able to show our face again. And yet we are very quick to judge other people in our relationships. And so every moment, know that the next breath you take, the next beat your heart makes, the next time you swallow in your mouth, it is because Allah has allowed it to happen. And you could be exposed in front of the whole world tomorrow. And the witness who could do the exposing is your spouse. So not only is it mutually assured destruction to be against your spouse, it is also silly because of the fact that if you are working in taqwa and bettering yourself, the people around you will become better as well. So taqwa is something not just that we practice it on a Thursday afternoon after Maghrib. This is something which should be governing our every move, that we are cautious as we move through our relationships, that we do not move at such speed that if we were to snag, we would rip our clothes away. Rather, we should walk in such a way that we are careful and we are predicting what's going to happen, and knowing that if something is to happen, we are moving slow enough for us to stop, to reevaluate, and to reassess how we're moving through life. So I think that is a very hypothetical way. In terms of practically speaking, what do we do? There is a beautiful concept in Islam of muhasabah, where you look at what you are doing and you take account of your actions. And there are many forms of muhasabah, one of which is before you're doing an action. Think about, is this good for me? Is this good for the people around me? Then at the end of the day, there is a muhasabah. You can do muhasabah as much as you want. Is the actions behoving of a true Ahmadi Muslim? Even when we talk about the dua istikhara, Allahumma inni astakhiruka bi ilmika wa astaqdiruka. The whole thing is not about marriage only. It is about talking to Allah and saying that, Allah, I ask of thee goodness. If this is good for my this life and the end of my life and good for my hereafter, then oh Allah Ta'ala, if it's good for me, then make it easier for me. Bring it closer to me and me closer to it. If this is bad for me, then make it further away from me, make me further away from it, and in its place bring something which I am happy with and make that blessed for me. And so at every stage of our life, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, be it with our children or be it with our spouses or be it with our parents, we must stop and walk carefully, not running through the bushes and acting how we wish to act, for that is the act of Satan, and that will no doubt lead us to destruction.
Jazakumullah khairan. Our last question for tonight will be, what's the Jamaat's guidance on adoption if a couple can't have a child? Maulana Janhagir Sahib, please.
Yes, I had a question. I was just going to ask whether we're maintaining this program till 2023.
No, we are this.
Yes, because mashallah, we've managed to keep quite a few people here for the last almost 2.5 hours now. Well, adoption in Islam is allowed, but in Islam, the child being adopted is not supposed to take the name of the father or the husband of the couple who are adopting him or her. They have to keep their own name. So that means their own father's name. If their father's name is not known, then in that case, then they have their own name. They do not become your own biological children because they're not your biological children. They will not be your heirs either. So at the time of your death, they will not receive a share of your property. You will have participated in their upbringing, and you have the right to give them anything you like while you're alive. So knowing that they will not receive a share in the inheritance, Oftentimes you'll see that Muslim people who adopt children will already have given them, made some donation to them, so that they don't remain without anything when they pass on. And they have the right to do that, because while you're alive, you have the right to use your money any way you like. But when you die, you lose that right. You have no say over what happens after your death. So this is something which people have to remember. I mean, sometimes people get emotional and say, oh, but the child is just like my own flesh and blood, and and this and that. Now, there's nothing against the brothers and sisters who are, for example, in a couple in a family where there are already children from the couple, and then they adopt somebody. If the brothers and sisters have a very loving relationship with the adopted child, there's nothing forbidding them to give them a part of what they're inheriting. They can do that, by mutual consent. So that's not at all disallowed. On the contrary, it's good, because in the Quran, Allah says that if there are other people present while the inheritance is being shared, give them something as well. I mean, they're there. So they're looking at everyone getting things and they're not getting anything. Give them something, so that their hearts are at peace and, they don't feel bad or anything like that. So for an adopted child, it would be much more important for them to think about that then. But in Islam, the laws of inheritance are very clear. So as far as adopting is concerned, it's considered something very good, very praiseworthy. And if somebody can adopt a child, I mean, what is adopting? You're giving the child an environment where he has people who are like parents looking after him or her. And instead of putting them in, in the care of people who are not going to care for them, like, as you know, in the care homes and centers, they don't look after the children. They can't, because they have so many, first of all. Even if they have the best of intentions, they can't really devote as much time as you could within a household to a child. So therefore, orphans have to be looked after, but they're not adopted in the Western sense of the term, that they take on the name of the family and they become heirs, etc. That doesn't happen in Islam. But there's people who enter your lives, you look after them, you take care of them, you love them, you give them things, you set them on a good track in their lives, and that's it. That's how far as it goes in Islam.
If I may just quickly on that as well, there's another point as well, which I think Jahangir Sahab is probably the one who told me this originally. The other problem that we have when we adopt a child is also the fact that there is the laws of parda, the veil, are still very much intact. So this individual who has not been born of your womb, when they come into your household, there is still the need to establish parda between them. Now, many people say that how can this be a parda issue when this baby came to my house? In that situation, again, we know that if the baby is suckled and breastfed by the mother, that baby then is also considered as one of the brothers and sisters, because they are not able to then marry one of those brothers and sisters. And someone very interesting, this point was made before about how these are actually the two reasons why people would be hesitant to adopt a baby or adopt a child. One is that they would have to give part of their inheritance to that child. And the second about the concept of marriage. And both of these have actually been removed, these hesitations. One, that if you wish for that child to be seen as a brother or sister or as a son, then the child is suckled as a baby. And if one wishes to give inheritance, and as Jahangir Sahab has already said, that can be given. And also upon death, within the will, 1/3 can be bequeathed to that child as well. And so if these things were not there, in fact, people would have seen this as potentially a move on the inheritance. Many children or mothers or fathers would think, we do not want to adopt a child, for then they would be part of the inheritance. They would take a part which is belonging to my children. And so Islam has very beautifully not only said that do adopt, look after children, spend all your money on them, but don't take advantage of them. And also it's enabled the way of adoption to be even clearer by allowing this child to retain his age-old knowledge of who he is. You cannot usurp a child and say he is now mine and he is from my heritage or my lineage. Enabling him to have that right, and also removing any hesitation possible for people to not want to adopt that child. So in every sense, Islam has established the rights of the orphan, even more so than the traditional values that we see in the West. I just thought that was a point to add.
There was a little question which just popped up on the screen here. Somebody asked, what if the wife can't conceive? Can the husband then decide to adopt? Well, of course they can decide to adopt, but it has to be a decision made by both parties. I mean, even you'll find that often it's the wife who wants to adopt because she has her maternal instincts. She wants to have a child. She wants to take care of a child. You know, some people, they love children, so if they can't have their own, they adopt. But again, we have to remember that the children will be adopted children in the sense of, in the Islamic sense, not in the Western sense. But they will enjoy each other's company like parents and children. Okay, so that was the last question, was it?
Yeah,
I think that was the outro music as well.
Yes, that was the closing scenes.
that was the last question. Yeah, so I'm calling Shafiq. Walaikum salam, is that?
Yeah, it's Abdulatif from US. I just want to add a 1 minute comment.
Yes, go on.
Yeah, I sent my question, but maybe you didn't get it. Thank you so much. I just want to clarify something in my own opinion on the second wife issue. Our speaker, Maulana, I forgot the name. It's kind of like, I appreciate what he was saying, but there was kind of a mixed messages on his point. For instance, like saying that the Imam Mahdi, alayhi salatu wasalam, said, like practically saying we should marry only one wife. I don't think if you read that content, that was not the complete outcome or the message of what he was saying, because the second Khalifa married more than one wife, more than two, even almost more than three. And then if you look at Islam generally, is our weakness. If it is our weakness that we cannot marry second wife, we should all say this is our weakness because we can't live up to that expectation. But in Islam, it's Masna wa Sulasa wa Ruba. And there are so many other hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu that we can do this. The only thing is that we have to be careful, like both speakers says. I don't want us to create an impression that in Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, we're encouraging only one wife. Data has shown that we can, if you can do it and you can follow the rules and regulations attached to it, which is very, very enormous, you should go ahead and do it. Uzur has approved so many second marriages. I'm just worried about that mixed messages because some people will take it away and it can also disturb the whole system again. So I just want to clarify that please.
Yes, thank you for that comment. If I may just say that as Maulana Mansour Clark Sahib very rightly said, that in the case, for example, of Hazrat Muslim Maud or the Holy Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the multiple marriages had a purpose. And one of the purposes was to have ladies available to educate the rest of the converts coming into Islam. And the case of the Hazrat Muslim Maud was the same, to educate the ladies within the Lajna. So because his several wives would be in contact with him, they could then go out and educate the ladies in the wider Jamaat. So that was the reason. So although, of course, as we did say, it's allowed in Islam, but it's not something which we advise. And even Allah himself says that. He says that you can marry one or two or three up to four, but if you can't maintain balance between all of them, then only one.
Exactly.
Yes, so the main thing we're going for is one. And in exceptional circumstances, maybe it might be pushed to two, maybe even to three or four, depending on the circumstances. But in normal circumstances, we do not encourage people to think that, okay, I'm fine now, I can go and do four or three or two. This is not what we encourage. We do encourage just a couple between one man and one wife. And I know this is sometimes difficult, to accept with certain cultural backgrounds, in particular in Africa, I know that. But we have to remember that this is the ideal situation. It's one man, one wife. And let's not forget that the promised Messiah himself was with one wife for almost his entire life. So he was first married, then they had to get divorced. He was with one wife. Then he married a second time. Again, he remained with one wife. So it depends on the circumstances. We're not telling people don't do it, it's not allowed. No. So I don't think there's any mixed message there. But it shouldn't be something to aim for, or that should be resorted to too freely. This is the other danger that we have to also think about. if men start thinking that, oh, it's okay now, it's like open season, we can just go and marry as many as we like because it's allowed, that is the other opposite, the other extreme, which is not at all what Islam wants. Because otherwise, imagine, in every society, there are almost the same number of women as there are of men. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And this is exactly what happened in China. In China, they were pursuing this one-child family policy for many decades. So when the people were finding out that they were going to bring forth a daughter, especially in the rural areas, they were aborting, and they were just waiting until they got a son. Now, China has several tens of millions of men who cannot find wives because the balance has been upset. Now, imagine if the ones who were getting married in China were not only marrying one, but were marrying 2 or 3 or 4. Already there's not enough women. And now some of them are monopolizing the women. What's going to happen? So a lot of Chinese men now are going out to Korea, they're going to Vietnam, they're going to Thailand to go and find wives. And this is creating untold, problems in their society now. So this is the thing. So we have to also bear that in mind, that Allah has created as many men as He's created women. And that is an indication that He desires that there should be one man and one woman. But that in exceptional circumstances, to preserve a society or for some beneficial aspect that we have to think about, it is allowed, but it's restricted up to 4. So this is the context that we have to keep this in. But I think that it's gone quite far. I think Mr. Kusi also is looking quite impatient. I think he wants to bring the...
Jazakallah. We have to round up now. We have to, it's been 2.5 hours. Jazakumullah. So I will give the floor to Brother Shafiq Kusi for the vote of thanks and the closing remarks quickly, and we round up 2 minutes for him. Jazakallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yeah, respected Murabian, and then all brothers and the respected National PAAMA UK, who has all been able to join us this evening as well. Our brothers and sisters, in UK here and also across the globe, as you can see the current brother who just asked the question all the way from US. So you can see all over across, Africa, Europe here, and then also USA, everywhere. They've all been able to join us this evening. I feel very honored to be addressing all of you this evening, especially giving the vote of thanks and also closing remarks as well. As you can all see, Alhamdulillah, it's been a very inspirational evening. We've all listened to such beautiful speeches, from our Morabians as well, and then also, of course, our respected brother from the National Retanata team secretary, who have to leave us a bit for another engagement as well. You can all see the messages that we've listened to this evening, very, very, very thought-provoking, very informative messages, educational messages, and then we've all learned a lot. I just want to draw attention to a few things just about the hikmah behind what we have, or the wisdom behind the speeches, the presentations, the messages that we have all listened to, that we should not just listen to them only on this platform and then go away and then forget about them. But I want us to go back and then reflect on them, think of them, and then reflect deeply about all the messages that we have listening to this evening, and then also be able to pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us to be able to put all these messages into an action, to be able to learn from it, and then also improve upon it, and also a way to be able to actually acquire a good rishta in looking into righteousness, and then also for taqwa as well. And then one of the beautiful message that I would like to also mention, that our brother Al-Murabi did mention when Huzo gave him that message, that make your home, make the atmosphere of your home a love and peaceful one. So this is the message I would like to give to all members, that make your home, the atmosphere of your home, love and peaceful one. So we all go back home, all the new ones who are yet to get married, this is what we look for. You look for the righteousness and the taqwa, and then make your homes, first change yourself first, and then that is the first register.
No, from how he replied to me, I don't think he gets. No, I will not say that.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So this is the message I would like to kindly mention to everyone, that we should all reflect among ourselves, and then the way we want our registers, the best that we want from our registers is how we should actually, do to ourselves. We should make sure that we train ourselves and then also be able to be adaptable into those situations and then be able to get a good register. So with this, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our respected, Murabians and Maulana Jahangir Sahib, Khan Sahib, our brother, our Maulana Mansoor Clark Sahib, Rafiuddin Sahib, and then also national members, respected also the team, the Restanata team, Lukman Sahib, and then also Sister Rashida Kwansa, and all the team, including also the Isha team, who have been able to put all these things in pieces for us, to be able to also set up the stage for us to be able to meet virtually. And then also, of course, all our brothers and sisters who have been able to stay with us these 2.5 hours, almost to 3 hours. You can see the importance of this particular, topic that we've been able to spend time to discuss and then also listen to as well. I would like to thank all of you for your time, and also all for your busy schedule. You've been able to share these inspirational messages with us as well, and then also a food for thought for all of us in this break time for the year, and then we have something to reflect about as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Before I come to an end, I would like to just give a couple of announcements. One, also, inshallah, tomorrow at 10:30, our beloved Huzu will inshallah be addressing the concluding session of Kadian Jasa. So I will humbly request all members, all PAAMA members, and all brothers and sisters across the globe who have been able to join us this evening. And then also you can share the message among your family and friends as well to be able to join. And then I'll also join and listen to our beloved Huzu concluding address. And alhamdulillah, this weekend alone, not only Kadian is actually having the JASA, the few African countries who are also having their JASAs as well. So, I know Nigeria, Mali, and few other ones are all having their JASA, and then they will be having they will be listening to the concluding address of our beloved Huzu as well. And then also tomorrow, inshallah, which is the 25th, our Lajna Maila, also marking their 100 years on the centenary, and then Lajna Sada Cyber UK has also requested all the mosques across UK and then Salah centers for Tahajjud prayers to take place. So also humbly requesting all PAAMA members and brothers and sisters across here to also take their Nasrat and then Lajna with them, and then go and then say your Tahajjud prayers at the centers that have been created for you, and the mosques across as well, to mark the centenary of our Lajna Maila. So not only the ladies or the men, we go and then take our families with us to go and then do that as well. So may Allah bless you all, and thank you very much for this evening and then joining us and then sharing these messages as well with us. And then inshallah we will be meeting again. I'm sure people have got more questions, but inshallah we will look into more programs like this in future. Thank you very much once again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Mansoor Sahib, please lead us in closing prayer, please.
Sorry, no, I can't. Jahangir Sahib is here. Please ask Jahangir Sahib.
Okay. Jahangir Sahib, please, can you lead us in closing prayer, please?
Only because Mansoor Sahib has asked. Please join me. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullah sanal jaza. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
May Allah bless you so much, all of you.
Allah bless you too.
Shafiq.